Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a US political update, an economic update, where I'm going to be talking to you about the trade war that is now raging once again between the US and China. We're going to talk about what Donald Trump said yesterday, a couple of extensive True Social posts where he has slapped some tariffs starting November the 1st on China, 100% tariffs, which will be added to any pre-existing tariffs. So if there's 50% tariff on anything from China, it'll now be 150% going forward, so on and so forth. Quite a controversy, this. And we'll look at a number of different dimensions concerning this news. Okay. As John Jackson says, Trump's latest post sure makes it sound like China has quietly leveraged an unassailable position on trade by quietly amassing rare earth minerals and then springing a trap on the United States. When you have an erratic leader and use non-secure messaging, this is what happens. Okay, well, what does Donald Trump say, first of all, before we go on to him actually finally slapping these tariffs on? So initially he said yesterday, some very strange things are happening in China. They're becoming very hostile and sending letters to countries throughout the world, and they want to impose export controls on each and every element of production having to do with rare earths and virtually everything else they can think of, even if it's not manufactured in China. Nobody has ever seen anything like this, but essentially it would clog the markets and make life difficult for virtually every country in the world, especially for China. We have been contacted by other countries who are extremely angry at this great trade hostility which came out of nowhere. Our relationship with China over the past 6 months has been a very good one, thereby making this move on trade an even more surprising one. I've always felt they've been lying in wait, and now, as usual, I've been proven right. There is no way that China should be allowed to hold the world captive, but that seems to have been their plan for quite some time, starting with the magnets and other elements that they have quietly amassed into somewhat of a monopoly position. A rather sinister and hostile move, to say the least, but the US has monopoly positions also, much stronger and more far-reaching than China's. I have just not chosen to use them. There was never a reason for me to do so until now. The letter they sent is many pages long and details with great specificity each and every element that they want to withhold from our nations. Things that were routine are no longer routine at all. I've not spoken to President Xi because there was no reason to do so. This was a real surprise, not only to me, but to all the leaders of the free world. I was to meet President Xi in 2 weeks at APEC in South Korea, but now there seems to be no reason to do so. The Chinese letters were especially inappropriate in that this was the day that, after 3,000 years of bedlam and fighting, there is peace in the Middle East. I wonder if that timing was coincidental. The Chinese letters, that's very apt considering John Searle, the philosopher who did the thought experiment of Chinese letters, has now died in the Chinese room. Anyway, I digress. Dependent on what China says about the hostile order that they have just put out, I will be forced as president of the United States of America to financially counter their move. For every element that they have been able to monopolize, we have too. I never thought it would come to this, but perhaps, as with all things, the time has come. Ultimately, though potentially painful, it will be a very good thing in the end for the USA. One of the policies that we are calculating at this moment is a massive increase of tariffs on Chinese products coming into the United States of America. There are many other countermeasures that are likewise under serious consideration. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So that's what he said initially. Then this further addendum, I guess, was published on True Social. It has been learned that China has taken an extraordinarily aggressive position on trade in sending an extremely hostile letter to the world stating that they're going to, in effective November 1st, 2025, impose large-scale export controls on virtually every product they make, and some not even made by them. This affects all countries without exception and was obviously a plan devised by them years ago. It is absolutely unheard of in international trade and a moral disgrace in dealing with other nations, based on the fact that China has taken this unprecedented position. And speaking only for the USA and not other nations who were similarly threatened, starting November the 1st, 2025, or sooner, depending on the further actions or changes taken by China, The United States of America will impose a tariff of 100% on China over and above any tariff that they are currently paying. Also, on November the 1st, we will impose export controls on any and all critical software. It is impossible to believe that China would have taken such an action, but they have. And the rest is history. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, this has caused quite the ruckus in the stock markets. The stock markets in the US lost $1.65 trillion yesterday. So just in, said Brian Allen last night, my time, 1.65 trillion was wiped off the US stock market today. Let that sink in. That's more than the entire GDP of Australia gone in a day. While Trump threatens 100% tariffs, plays economic chicken with China, and fuels a shutdown from the golf course, $1.65 trillion just vanished. And this had a massive effect on Bitcoin, dollar, crypto. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit later about some pretty controversial stuff concerning crypto and people shorting the market. Somebody or some people made some serious money off this, and they knew what Donald Trump was about to say. So there was some corruption going on in the heart of the government. Anyway, crypto prices, says the Telegraph, plunge as Trump hits China with 100% tariffs. Okay, let's get a little bit more understanding of what has been going on here and the relationship between China and the US in terms of this trade and particularly rare earths and export controls. So they are tightening these export controls, China. So China dominates production of rare earths and certain other key materials, which are key components in cars, smartphones, and many other items. The last time Beijing tightened export controls after Trump raised tariffs on Chinese goods early this year, there was an outcry from many US firms reliant on the materials. Car maker Ford even had to temporarily pause production. In addition to tightening rules for rare earth exports, China has opened a monopoly investigation into the US tech firm Qualcomm that could stall its acquisition of another chip maker. Although Qualcomm is based in the US, a significant portion of its business is concentrated in China. Now, remember, of course, this is me speaking now, that these tariffs that the US is imposing are taxes on the American business or consumer. So either the importer pays, they either sink the tariffs, i.e. they don't make as much profit, so it's a tax on profits, or they pass on the price, the cost of the tariffs to the next entity along the process. So importers literally have to pay it. You're not taxing China, you are taxing the importer of Chinese goods. So an American entity importing Chinese goods gets taxed, gets tariffed. They have a choice, sink it or pass it on. And, you know, you've got, what is it? Distributors, hauliers, manufacturers who might be using those components. What else? Wholesalers, sellers, consumers. All of that process. They will have to make a choice whether they put up the prices or sink some of those costs. So, for example, Brazil's been tariffed 50%, I think, on coffee, and I think coffee's now 22% higher than it was. So there's a lot of people along that line sinking those price rises or the cost of the tariffs, but it has filtered down. Coffee filtered. It's filtered down to a 22% rise. I think that's what it was. It's certainly what it was. But 100% of the tariffs are extracted from the US economy and from those entities, either in terms of a loss of profit or just higher costs. Now, so going back to, sorry, just a bit of a sidebar there to remind you, although Qualcomm is based, so we're talking about Qualcomm, that is going to be investigated as a monopoly by China. Although Qualcomm is based in the US, a significant portion of the business is concentrated in China. Beijing has also said it will charge new port fees on ships with ties to the US, including those owned or operated by US firms. Some very strange things are happening in China, Trump wrote in a post on social media on Friday. They are becoming very hostile. The US and China have been in a fragile trade détente since May, when the two sides agreed to drop triple-digit tariffs on each other's goods that had nearly stopped trade between the two countries. The move left US tariffs on Chinese goods facing an additional 30% levy, compared with the start of the year when US goods entering China face a new 10% tariff. Sorry, I got the comma demarcation a bit wrong there. Officials have held a series of talks since then on matters including TikTok, agricultural purchases, and the trade of rare earths and advanced technology like semiconductors. The two sides were expected to meet again this month in a summit in South Korea. China expert Jonathan Shin, a fellow at the Brookings Institution, said Xi's recent actions were a bid to shape the upcoming talks, noting that the recent rare earths directive does not go into effect immediately. Quote, he's looking for ways to seize the initiative, he said. The Trump administration is having to play a game of whack-a-mole and deal with these issues as they come up. He added that he did not think China was worried about US retaliation. In response, quote, what China took away from the Liberation Day tariffs, so the original day of all these huge tariffs that were actually not reciprocal tariffs, but representations of trade deficits or trade surpluses, although everyone got tariffed no matter what. But if you had a trade surplus, or if the US had a trade surplus with a nation, you only got a 10% tariff. Everyone else's tariffs was in line with the trade deficit. Okay. So what was learned, what China took away from the Liberation Day tariffs and a cycle of escalation followed by de-escalation, is that Chinese side had a higher pain threshold, he said. From their perspective, the Trump administration blinked. Now, this is understandable because China is a dictatorship and you've got some kind of weird hybrid economic system. It's not quite command economics, but it's not quite free market economics either. It is a kind of weird, centralized, quasi-capitalist system. But because it's effectively a dictatorship, these people don't vote, the consumers don't vote Xi in or out, then there's not a lot they can do when prices go up. So there's a lot more resilience in China to the effect of trade wars. Whereas the US at the moment is still a democracy and nothing affects voters as much as getting hurt in the pocket. So there is this idea that actually China is in a much stronger position. It can weather these storms far more than the American population can. And that gives it a very, very valuable card to play here. In prior rounds of trade talks, China has pushed for looser US restrictions on semiconductors. It's also interested in securing more stable tariff policies that would make it easier for its businesses to sell into the US. Xi had previously used as leverage his country's dominance of rare earth production, but the export rules unveiled this week target overseas defense manufacturers, making them particularly serious, said Gracelyn Bhaskaran, director of the Critical Minerals Security Program at Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Studies. Quote, nothing makes America like targeting our defense industry, she said. The US is going to have to negotiate because we have limited options. And in an era of rising geopolitical tension and potential conflict, we need to build our industrial defense base. So they might meet Xi and Trump, but it looks like the US might have a bit of a problem here, that China might have more cards, even though Trump has been very bombastic with his rhetoric, claiming that actually he has cards and they can do some things. And that might well be the case. But essentially with these trade wars, no one wins. No one wins these trade wars. This is bad for China. It's bad for the United States. Okay, then, so that's what's going on. Markets went nuts. And then we have this crypto issue as well. And it looks like someone made an absolute ton of money. Someone in Trump's circle may have just pulled off insider trading on steroids. A brand new crypto account was opened yesterday morning, 30 minutes before Trump announced 100% China tariffs. It opened a massive multi-million-dollar leveraged Bitcoin short. The market tanked. The trader made $192 million in 2 hours. And that's per Yahoo Finance. You don't guess a move like that. You get tipped off. Here we have some more graphs. Shout out to this guy for opening a $330 million short position on Ethereum. minutes before Trump announced more tariffs on China. Let the corruption live on. And the hyperliquid whale shorting BTC, ETH, Ethereum, Bitcoin, yesterday was placing shorts up until exactly 1 minute before Trump threatened tariffs against China. The last short was placed at 2049 GMT. Trump tweeted at 2050 GMT. What incredible luck. And here, crypto is a rigged casino, and today's events prove it beyond doubt. A single colossal BTC whale shorted at the peak. Then just minutes before the market-shattering crash piled on millions more in shorts. At the very bottom of the drop, he closed 90% of his Bitcoin short and completely exited the Ethereum short, pocketing roughly $190 to $200 million. Absolutely incredible in a single day. That's the only instance we can trace, but speculation is rampant and the scale was far larger and extended across other exchanges. Don't be naive, this wasn't luck. Someone was either manipulating the market or front running it. Either way, the collapse was engineered and investors have every reason to be alarmed. It's just more corruption. And then there is the wider economic story here. So inflation is starting to bite. This was from the 5th, I think, October the 5th. The impact of Trump's tariffs is starting to show in consumer prices in the US, from cans of soup to car parts, says the Financial Times. For the past 2 years, commodity inflation has been close to zero. We are starting to see commodity inflation creeping up. More and more companies are openly talking about raising prices to compensate for higher costs of imported goods. So here's a little graph to show you audio equipment, coffee, women's dresses, hardware and supplies, bicycles, computers. These things are going up in price fairly considerably. And then you've got to add this to all these other variables, all these other impacts on the American economy. So if you're going to collect 15 million immigrants up and lock them up or send them to, I don't know, El Salvador, whatever you're doing, ICE is going around locking these people up, then they're not going to either turn up for work because they've been locked up, or they're too afraid to go to work because they might get locked up. And you have an issue with labour, particularly in the agricultural sectors, but also hospitality, construction, so on and so forth. You've had negative growth. You've had a contraction in manufacturing for every month since Trump took office, I think, or certainly for the last 7 months. It's not looking good there either. You have had really poor jobs stats for the last few months. It is looking bad across the board. Here, Reason Magazine reports the Trump administration said Americans would fill farm jobs vacated by undocumented workers. That's not happening, according to the Department of Labor. They now admit that. Trump's immigration crackdown is causing a shortage of farm workers, and of course that pushes up the price of labor. So when you have a labor shortage, of course you're fighting for employees, which means you have to attract the employees to your business rather than go to any other business. So you have to put the wages up, or you attract them with other provisions, healthcare and whatever, which then puts your costs up. So this is inflationary. In other words, getting rid of migrant workers is inflationary. So not only are tariffs inflationary, but your immigration policy is inflationary as well. This is just an absolute nightmare politically for Trump. And he might be reading the tea leaves there and thinking, well, sod it, everything's pretty unpopular across the board. If you look, you might be a big supporter of Trump and think he's wonderful, but you aren't the electorate. The electorate is made up of Democrats, and they all really hate Trump. Independents, who are now skewing much, much more anti-Trump, and Republicans, who are actually staying fairly stable, but they're even starting to slip in certain categories in terms of he's underwater on including immigration, weirdly. Because even some Republicans are looking at what's going on with ICE and saying, actually, no, we didn't vote for this type thing. So this could be it is a real worry for Trump. But then the question is, well, how does he react to this? Does he change his policy? No, he'll double down. What he'll do instead is try and rig the elections, try and call martial law. He's trying to go after the funders of the opposition at the moment, George Soros, Act Blue. There's 11 democratic entities that he is Undivided, I think, is another organization who are not terrorist organizations, but he's claiming they are, just so he can shut down the funding for the opposition, and so that the Democrats will struggle to win any elections. It's a form of kind of rigging the elections. And we hear that Dominion voting machines, the company that took Fox News to court and won $788 million, they've just been taken over by a Republican, and they're now settling out of court with all the other people that they were involved in court cases with. And it looks like now the Republicans are controlling the voting machines. That is happening too. Wouldn't you believe it? Just incredible. So really worrying times. The good news, I guess, for the opposition is that all the special elections are going the Democrats' way at the moment. They just won a mayoral race in Fairbanks in Alaska. That's the first time that's gone blue for 12 years. They have, even in Texas at the moment, the polls are looking good. Tennessee, even one of the districts in Tennessee that have a special election in December, people are thinking, oh, that could be a sleeper fight there, even though it was a Republican plus 22 district, or 21.5 district in the last election. All the special elections at the moment, that's the other one. Susan Collins in Maine, the Maine senator, she's 12 points underwater at the moment. What's his name? Gantry, whatever his name. I'll have a quick look, but he's doing particularly well against Susan Collins, and she may lose her seat. Actually, it's Graham Plattner I was thinking of, but he's one of four people. You've got the governor who's possibly going to run against Susan Collins, Janet Mills, and then these other three. So, but it appears that Susan Collins is underwater, I guess, against a generic opponent by something like 12 points at the moment. So the point being is that things are not looking good for the Republicans in terms of many of these races that are taking place. And this is a reflection of, I think, the suite of policies that really aren't that popular across the political spectrum. And then add to this the idea that, hey, you're supposed to be cutting down on government spending, but actually spending's gone up. Deficit ceiling, the debt ceiling has gone up. What is going on? Wasn't Elon Musk supposed to come in and with his Doge cut loads of costs? And no, did Doge save $2 trillion as was the initial claim? He said, I'm going to save 2 trillion, then it's 1 trillion, then it was 500 million, sorry, and then it was like, nah, not even close. Total spending, excluding interest, rose 220 billion, or 4% for the entire fiscal year. So the exact opposite happened. Actually, expenditure went up, and loads of people are sacked and then had to be re-employed, and there are probably a bunch of court cases as well. It's probably just overall more expensive than not doing anything. Wall Street Journal reports tariffs are way up. Interest on debt topped $1 trillion, and Doge didn't do much. As the books closed on the US government's fiscal 2025, here's what changed about the federal budget and what hasn't. Well, it's not looking good. And then all the aforementioned impacts are going to hurt even more. And then if the government shutdown doesn't bring about some agreement on medical insurance premiums, then those insurance premiums are going to double or triple for low and middle income Americans. It is not looking good. And I think Donald Trump is going to feel like he's faced with only one option, which is to rig the elections, because it's not looking good for the Republicans to hold on to the House of Representatives. And my goodness, if it keeps going in this direction, they could even lose the Senate. That's less likely to happen. They'd have to have a really bad day at the office for that to happen, given the sorts of senators, because only a third of the senators are up at each 2-year point. They have 6-year tenures, so a third every 2 years. But every 2 years, every representative in the House of Representatives is up to be re-elected. So they can lose the House of Representatives, which is on a knife edge anyway. I think that will happen, but the Senate is, with each passing week, is looking more likely. But then it's a long time till November 2026. But at the moment, things are looking pretty desperate, and ramping up this trade war with China is a very dangerous economic pastime, and we'll have to see how it all plays out. Anyway, hopefully that was of interest and was informative. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. Speak to you soon.